This is a tale of the future. For centuries, the Sol hegemon has ruled uncontested the greatest swath of human space in the galaxy. Earth is long abandoned, its great cities reduced to overgrown ruins as mankind has sought new homes and new dominions amongst the stars. But now the beating heart of the Sol hegemon has been convulsed by revolution. The rebels claim they fight for freedom and equality, but are they truly any better than those whom they name oppressor? But on the fringe of human space, worlds remain untouched by war and revolt. It is to this region that the crew of the Babylon Rocker have come, seeking peace and escape, both from the chaos of revolution and the dark specters of the past. On the fringe, there is hope. On the fringe is freedom and light and opportunity. But with such freedoms and opportunities come many dangers, some of the future, others of the past that they seek to avoid. Such is the nature of the wild edge of human space. There lies adventure. There goes Babylon Rocker. The Gozoku, by far one of my personal favorite Legend of the Five Rings storylines. A period of time that lasted over 40 years in which authority within the Emerald Empire lay not with the emperors or their courts, but with a shadowy triumvirate that ruled from behind the scenes. Two emperors would be reduced to little more than puppets of its machinations. Its rise to power just as dramatic as its fall. Those who masterminded the Gozoku were motivated equally by the lust for power and the desire to improve the lot of the empire, a genuine idealism and a belief that the Hantei family was no longer fit for purpose and that power could not be trusted to a single man. So, are we hyped yet? Are we ready to start? Because this is the story of the Gozoku. And it begins with the accession of Hantei Fujiwa, 5th Emperor of Rokugan in the year 371. The first 4 years of the new emperor's reign were uneventful, mostly. Like his predecessors, he took a woman of the Doji family to wife, and one day, while out at sea for some reason, his ship was caught up in a storm, and it was believed that he survived only by praying to Suitengu, the fortune of the sea. This brings us to one of those moments of contradictory writing in the lore of L5R. According to one source, Suitengu has always been the fortune of the sea, married to Isora, the fortune of the seashore. As you might expect, both are very powerful and temperamental fortunes, and in fact both have specific religious orders dedicated to propitiating them so as to make sure that people don't drown at sea. They are called the Order of the Sea and the Order of the Shore respectively, and both are unsurprisingly concentrated in the Mantis Isles. According to the other source, Suitengu was originally a mortal fisherman who had once saved Hantei Bosai, Fujiwa's father, from drowning. And it was only after Fujiwa prayed to the spirit of Suitengu to save him from that storm that the fisherman was elevated to fortune status. Personally, I favor the former story, but you're free to choose whichever one you like. It's your role-playing game after all. But enough trivia. How did the Gozoku rise to power and usurp the authority of the emperor? It all began in the year 375. In that year, a new monstrosity emerged from the shadowlands to threaten the empire. It was called the Uso no Oni. Not much else is known about it, but it was able to assemble a mighty army of monsters and the tainted and marched upon the great crab fortress of Shiro Hiruma. Alas, there are almost no details with regards to the siege of Shiro Hiruma. All that is known is that the crab met the enemy there, but that they suffered heavy casualties, for Uso no Oni was described as a cunning creature, and used many clever tricks to maximize the number of enemy casualties. The crab were of course prepared to fight it out alone as they had always done. Then, to the surprise of everyone in Shiro Hiruma, the Imperial Legions arrived, with Emperor Fujiwa himself at their head. For the first time since the war with Fuleng over 300 years ago, a sitting emperor was actually going to participate in a battle. Fujiwa had his flaws, as we will soon see, but he was no coward, and he was a man prepared to fight for his people and his empire. But apparently he wasn't done with surprising the crab just yet, because after he arrived, he placed both the imperial legions he'd brought with him and himself under the command of the crab champion Hida Ichido. Again, alas, there are no details regarding the attack on Shiro Hiruma. All we know is that eventually the Shadowland hordes were defeated. There's not even any mention of whether or not Uso no Oni survived. I can only presume that it was destroyed because it never appears again. The only other highlight of this Shadowlands attack suggests that the fighting wasn't just limited to Shiro Hiruma, for there is also mentioned a major attack on Kyuden Hida, and that when the Shadowland monsters breached the gate, they found the Emperor of Rokugan and the Crab Clan champion waiting for them. Shoulder to shoulder, the two men held the gate against the horde. It's never mentioned what weapon Ichido wielded, but Fujiwa held in his hands the ancestral sword of the Hantei family, Akuai Uo, a sword forged for his great-grandfather, the Emperor Genji, by his cousin Doji Yasurugi. It was said that during the fight, the blade gleamed a bright gold, as if Amaterasu herself smiled upon the Emperor. So many monsters died upon its blade that it is said that ever afterwards, Akuai Uo gained special efficacy in slaying those bearing the Shadowland taint. At any rate, the warriors of Rokugan held firm, and in the end, the forces of the Shadowland were forced back to the realm from whence they'd crawled. It was a great personal triumph for Emperor Fujiwa, a triumph that was unfortunately soured when news reached him that his wife had died while he was on campaign. Naturally, Fujiwa soon remarried, and this second marriage would produce 3 children, a daughter who has remained unnamed, and 2 sons, Kusada and Muhaki. The death of his first wife aside, though, his victory alongside the Crab Clan was still a great triumph for Fujiwa. And had he played his cards differently in the aftermath, this could have been something he would have used to rally support to the imperial family, restoring faith in the Hantei line, which had been waning during the reigns of his father and grandfather. Alas, for all his personal bravery, there is more to being an emperor than being a war leader. One must also be politic, and unfortunately the new emperor was anything but. Upon his return from Crab Lands, Fujiwa proceeded in open court to castigate both the Lion Clan and the Crane Clan, accusing them of weakening the Crab Clan, thus leaving the southern border vulnerable, and in response, threatening harsh political and economic reprisals against them. The thing is, Emperor Fujiwa was technically correct. The Crab Clan has always been politically weak when it comes to the dealings of the court. And for all his great bravery and strength in battle, Hida Ichido, the clan champion, was especially weak in this regard. As such, the Lion and the Crane, the 2 most prestigious clans in the empire, had repeatedly managed to maneuver the crab into situations where they could benefit at the crab's expense. The problem, though, is that even if the emperor was correct in his condemnation, open political attacks of this kind will only serve to alienate the great clans. Even with such apparatuses as the Emerald Magistrates and the Imperial Legions, the great legacies of his great-grandfather Genji, as emperor, a lot of Fujiwa's strength still rested upon his relations with the great clans, and what he was doing now was only serving to alienate the 2 most prominent ones in the empire. Such actions were also likely to cause great unease in all the other clans, great and minor. If the emperor is willing to go after his own right and left hands, what does that say about their chances should they incur his displeasure? One such concerned individual was Bayushi Atsuki, clan champion of the Scorpion. Atsuki was a man of great cunning, great ruthlessness, and great ambition. Like many in the empire, he was increasingly convinced of the fallibility of the Hantei emperors, and Fujiwa's recent behavior towards the Lion and Crane clans only served to convince him that the empire could not be entrusted to men whose only claim was bloodline. Better that power be entrusted to wiser, more capable men. Unsurprisingly, Bayushi Atsuki considered himself to be one of those men. Plus, Emperor Fujiwa's willingness to openly attack the Lion and Crane clans made the Scorpion champion more than a little nervous about the fate of his own clan. After all, the Scorpion were the Emperor's underhand, the ones entrusted to do all the things that are necessary but dishonorable. Theirs was a vital role, but in a society where honor counts for almost everything, the Scorpion were the most hated and mistrusted in all of the Empire. The Lion and Crane, with their great honor and prestige, might be able to weather Fujiwa's political attack on them. Atsuki knew that his clan would not be so fortunate should the Emperor turn his wrath against them. The Scorpion champion therefore resolved to do something about this new Emperor. But he knew that he could not act alone. Again, the Scorpion's reputation with clans great and small was rock bottom. If Atsuki were to move against the Emperor alone, he would simply be painting a massive target on him and his entire clan. And so, in late 375, when Emperor Fujiwa held the traditional annual Winter Court, essentially the political highlight of the year, Atsuki was among the attendants, and he came looking for allies. To understand what happened next, we need to sort of zoom out a bit and take a look at the political situation of at least the great clans at this time. We already know Atsuki's position on the matter of the Emperor, but to whom among the great clans could Atsuki turn to in order to enact his plan? From the beginning, Atsuki knew that the Crab clan were simply not an option. Hida Ichido owed too much to the Emperor. Fujiwa had come to aid him in a time of great need and had even fought at his side. Anyone with eyes to see could tell that the Crab Clan champion was the Emperor's man. There would be no chance of Atsuki making an ally out of him. As for the Dragon Clan, at this point they were ruled by Togashi Hikaru. And, like pretty much every single Dragon Clan champion since the days of Togashi himself, Hikaru had no interest in involving himself in the affairs of the Empire if he could help it. And by extension, neither did the Dragon Clan. And so Atsuki could rely upon the most northerly of the great clans to, as usual, maintain their customary neutrality. What about the Lion Clan? Given recent events and given their immense pride, surely they would have good reason to have grievance with the Emperor. Technically, yes, but it really didn't matter. The Lion Clan is often derided by quite a few L5R fans for being boring compared to the others. The human warrior, the bog standard, the vanilla. But the one thing that most agree on as the most defining trait of the Lion Clan is that their loyalty to the imperial family has always been ironclad. Asking the Lion Clan to go against the Emperor would be like asking a fish to stop swimming. What's more, the Lion Clan champion at the time, Okodo Mitsuyuki, was a fairly weak and diffident man, but also one of great serenity and honor. When Emperor Fujiwa castigated his clan for weakening the crab, Mitsuyuki simply accepted his royal master's condemnation without any sign of displeasure. What about the Phoenix clan? At this time, the clan champion was Shiba Toshiken, but like nearly all Phoenix clan champions, Toshiken was little more than a mouthpiece for the real authority of the clan, the Council of Elemental Masters. And unfortunately, information about the Council of Five is incredibly scanty. There is only one named individual with any information about him around this time, Isawa Ryote, the Master of Earth. And the only detail mentioned about him was that, as an apprentice Shugenja, he participated in what was known as the Battle of the Sun Princess. At some completely prior undefined date, the Phoenix and Dragon clans were in conflict, and one day the Dragon sent an army into Phoenix lands. However, the Phoenix prepared an ambush for the Dragon army in a small mountain pass. Taking position in the cliffs above the enemy army and taking advantage of a very thick morning mist, the Phoenix descended upon the Dragon and crushed them completely. In other words, a detail completely irrelevant to what's going on now. Nevertheless, Bayushi Atsuki did find one ally from the Phoenix clan at the Winter Court of 375, a young, idealistic imperial scribe named Shiba Gaiju Shiko. Like Atsuki, young Gaiju Shiko had a particularly low opinion of Emperor Fujiwa, and was easily persuaded that the empire might be best served if it were governed by a council of wise men. But unlike Atsuki, Gaiju Shiko had no ulterior motives. He was motivated solely by the conviction that what he and his new partner were doing was to the benefit of the empire. And thus, a covert alliance was forged between the Scorpion and Phoenix clans. There's absolutely no mention of the Phoenix Clan champion or the Council of Five's opinion on the matter, but given the Phoenix Clan's typically inward-looking stance and subsequent events, it's safe to assume that the leadership was on board with Gaiju Shiko's plan as long as it didn't inconvenience them. For all intents and purposes, as far as this conspiracy was concerned, Gaiju Shiko was effectively the leader of the Phoenix Clan's interests in the matter. And finally, of course, there was the Crane Clan. In stark contrast to the meek and passive Akodo Mitsuyuki, the Crane were led in those days by Doji Mizobu, a man, unusually for a Crane and especially a Doji, possessed of a distinct lack of self-control. Whereas the Lion Clan champion had weathered Emperor Fujiwa's criticism without complaint, the Crane champion's response was open outrage, a very impolitic thing for a samurai of his rank to do in public. Certainly, the Crane would be a useful ally to Atsuki and Gaiju Shiko's conspiracy, but with a man as unreliable and unsubtle as Mizobu leading them, including the Crane might be more of a problem than it was worth. And so, the two conspirators focused not on approaching Mizobu, but rather his son and heir, Doji Raigu. This was a young man who could not be more unlike his father. Unlike the unstable Mizobu, Raigu was always described as a man who rarely smiled and almost never laughed. Never friendly, but always courteous. Demanding and uncompromising, but never cruel. More to the point, in response to Emperor Fujiwa's condemnation at the Winter Court, the young Crane heir wrote an essay the following year called Relations Between Ruler and Subject. An essay that very courteously, but also quite openly, critiqued the emperor for his condemnation of the Crane clan. The essay's publication turned into something of a minor scandal. Obviously, the emperor found the essay completely offensive to him, but with characteristic Crane subtlety, Raigu had worded his criticism in such a way that any attempt by the emperor to actually lash out against him would only make him look petty, and tarnish his image in the eyes of the court and the clans even more so. Here was the ideal ally. And so, the year following the Winter Court, 376, Atsuki and Gaiju Shiko approached Doji Raigu and persuaded him to join them in their plot against the emperor. The future Crane clan champion agreed, and the Gozoku was born. The conspiracy had its leaders, it had a goal. Now it was a matter of assembling enough allies to put their plan into motion. Emperor Fujiwa was no fool, though. While unaware of the exact nature of the conspiracy, he did know that there were political forces slowly arranging themselves against him. Obviously, the best solution to this would be to nip the problem in the bud before it could fully manifest. Just how was the Emperor going to do that? Find out next time. Until then.